Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and really try to get straight to the insights. Today we're kicking things off with something pretty striking news that on June 25th, well, something unknown, hit a key Russian military-industrial facility in Taganrog. It's, quite a development, even in a conflict that keeps throwing up surprises.
It really is, yeah. And it's a stark reminder, I think, of just how quickly the whole nature of conflict is changing. So this deep dive, we're really focusing on the escalating drone warfare in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We'll dig into how both sides are, rapidly innovating, adapting, facing these new challenges. It's this intense tech arms race. And that Taganrog strike, that's our starting point.
Right. So our mission today is pretty clear.
Right.
Let's unpack the current state of this drone warfare. We want to look at the strategic implications and understand why this theater of conflict is, well, genuinely revolutionizing modern combat. Okay, so let's get into it. The Taganrog strike, let's start right there. The target itself, the Atlant-Aero plant, it sounds like a really significant spot in the Russian military-industrial complex. We're talking about a place making components for combat drones, control systems, even those Orion drones, EW complexes, electronic warfare, that is, and systems for FPV drones and loitering munitions, too.
Yeah, and it's actually bigger than just drones. This plant, it's also involved in building and fixing some really high-value aircraft. Think A-50s, the airborne early warning planes, IL-76 transports, IL-38 patrol aircraft. And what's interesting, really interesting, is this isn't the first hit. It was targeted, about a year ago, March 9th, 2024. A hangar got damaged then, so it points to, persistent targeting. Ukraine clearly sees it as a critical choke point for Russia.
And the official stories coming out about this latest strike, they're fascinatingly contradictory, aren't they? You've got the Ukrainian official, Andrei Kovalenko, heads their counter-disinformation center saying, quote, something unknown flew into the Atlant-Aero plant. Very vague. But then the Russians, they report shooting down 40 Ukrainian drones across several regions, but specifically 7 over the Rostov region where Taganrog is. So what do we make of these totally different stories? Is it just standard fog of war, disinformation, or maybe something else?
That's a great point. Often, the lack of a clear story from both sides tells you a lot. Ukraine's something unknown. Well, that could be deliberate ambiguity. Keep Russia guessing about their tech. Or maybe it genuinely was something new, something they haven't revealed yet. And Russia's claim, 40 drones down across the board, but only 7 near the actual target. It feels like an attempt to downplay the hit, right? Project Control say, we got most of them, even if one got through effectively. It's that classic pattern, a successful strike versus a narrative of successful defense.
Right. And the reported aftermath, it wasn't just the plant. There was a fire at a sports complex, Forte Arena, damage to a high school, 2 residential buildings in Taganrog, plus hits on a grain warehouse and another industrial site in nearby Azov. Now, the Russian governor, Yuri Slusar, did report no casualties in Taganrog. That's important. But still, the sheer spread of damage, it doesn't sound like just one precise hit, does it?
Exactly. The fact it hit civilian spots too, schools, homes, it suggests either a very large attack, maybe spread out, or perhaps a swarm attack where things got messy. Maybe some drones leaked through the defenses because there are just so many. It really highlights how hard it is to get a perfect defense against these things and the potential for wider disruption, even if the main target is military. It's not just about blowing up one building. It's about pressure, economic, and psychological.
Yeah, what really jumps out at me here is how much this whole conflict has just become a test bed for drone tech. Both sides, Ukraine and Russia, they've poured resources into it. It's fundamentally, as the sources say, revolutionizing the way wars are fought. It really is a tech arms race in real time. But when we say revolutionizing warfare, what does that actually mean on the ground? Is it just a new type of weapon, or is it shifting doctrine, maybe even how we think about national defense?
That's the heart of it, isn't it? It's more than just a new tool. It's a whole new way of fighting. You're seeing these, relatively cheap, almost disposable things. Some cost less than a fancy bike. Taking on multi-million-dollar defense systems, it completely changes the math on attrition and value. It's less about massive firepower, more about being smart, adaptive, and doing it at scale. It challenges the whole idea of air superiority when potentially any soldier could launch an aerial weapon, or a country could send out hundreds of drones for the cost of one missile. It's a genuine paradigm shift.
That's fascinating. Puts the scale in perspective. Okay, let's zoom in on Ukraine's side. Their offensive capabilities, their goal seems pretty clear. Hit Russian military infrastructure, deep behind the lines. Weaken them with these long-range strikes. And President Zelensky himself said it, right? June 24th. Ukraine can produce over 8 million drones of various types each year, and he wants Allied investment to hit that number. 8 million. I mean, that's almost hard to picture, that level of industrial commitment. Is this shift to mass-produced, cheap drones a totally different strategic path?
Oh, absolutely. That scale, it's not just about numbers. It's about a new kind of strategic pressure. You force your opponent to spend massively on defense against relatively cheap attacks. That industrial capacity itself becomes a weapon. It flips the old quality over quantity idea. Now, quantity, if it's smart and innovative, can actually swamp even sophisticated defenses. It lets you do saturation attacks, constantly probe defenses, keep up a persistent threat that just drains enemy resources, diverts them from their own plans.
And we've definitely seen the impact of these strikes. Remember Operation Spiderweb back in early June? That one went after Russian long-range bombers. Reports suggested, somewhere between 13 and 41 strategic aircraft damaged or destroyed. That really highlighted, as the analysis put it, fundamental inadequacies in Russian strategic asset protection.
So these aren't just pinpricks. They're hitting seriously valuable stuff.
Exactly. Those spiderweb numbers, even if they're a range, are huge. They point to a massive vulnerability. These are strategic assets, bombers meant for long range, possibly nuclear missions. They cost a fortune and take ages to replace. The fact Ukraine can reach them deep inside Russia and do that kind of damage, it really shows a failure in Russia's layered defenses. It's like finding the weak spot on a military that's always prided itself on air power. And it's not just the numbers or the range, it's the innovation, too.
Yeah.
Ukraine's been developing these fiber optic controlled drones. Apparently, they're really effective because they make traditional jamming ineffective. Could you explain that a bit for listeners maybe not familiar? What makes fiber optics so resistant to EW?
Yeah, sure. That's a really key innovation. So most drones use radio signals or satellite navigation, like GPS, right, to talk to the operator, find the target. Those signals can be jammed or spoofed by electronic warfare systems. Basically, mess with the signal so the drone gets lost or can't be controlled. But fiber optic cables use light pulses to send data. They're immune to that kind of radio frequency interference. Think of it like the drone having this super long, almost invisible physical connection back to the operator. It means it can fly right through heavy jamming and still get commands. It just takes away one of the main ways militaries have learned to counter drones. A real headache for traditional EW.
That really does sound like a game changer.
Yeah.
And beyond Taganrog and Spiderweb, June's seen this steady drumbeat of Ukrainian drone attacks, hasn't it? Oil refineries, chemical plants, a military equipment factory near Moscow, ammo dumps, even a fuel train. It shows a real strategic depth, trying to hit Russia's war machine and economy.
It does. It looks like a systematic campaign of strategic attrition. Hitting refineries, chemical plants that hurts logistics, the economy, causes shortages, targeting equipment plants, ammo dumps that directly hits their ability to fight. It seems designed to stretch Russian defenses really thin, make them make tough choices about what to protect. It's not just about winning battles, it's about trying to cause strategic paralysis.
Okay, so that's Ukraine pushing hard with range and innovation. But obviously Russia's not standing still. How have they adapted? We know they've launched a ton of Shahed drones at Ukraine. What was the number? Over 28,700 since the start.
Yeah, the sheer volume of those Shahids is immense. It creates constant pressure on Ukraine's air defenses, on civilians, and Russia's own industrial goal is huge too, aiming for 1.4 million drones annually for 2025. But, and this is important context, they were really caught flat-footed back in early 2022. Remember the success Ukraine had with the Turkish TB2 Bayraktars? And their own EW systems, like the Krasuka 4, apparently had fundamental deployment failures. So how does a big traditional military pivot that fast under fire?
Well, the sources suggest they've actually adapted remarkably well in some areas. They talk about remarkable tactical learning capabilities.
Yeah.
And specifically, their electronic warfare response is called their most successful adaptation domain.
Yeah.
We're hearing about systems like Pol 21 that jams GPS and other navigation signals over 25 kilometers. And tactical jammers like vulnerabilities. How big a deal are these systems, especially given where they started?
That 25-kilometer range on the Pol 21, that's massive. It creates this huge bubble where drones relying on satellite navigation just can't operate reliably. It forces them blind or off course. It's become a core part of their counter-drone playbook, denying airspace. And the vulnerabilities, being tactical, protects specific units on the ground. Together, it's a huge jump from those early failures. What's really striking is how fast they integrated them. They moved from these big, vulnerable truck-mounted EW systems to portable, soldier-carried ones, developing trench-level EW, jamming right at the front line, giving immediate local protection.
Wow, sounds like a complete rethink of their EW strategy. And it wasn't just the tech, right? Their doctrine changed too, moving from centralized command for EW to more distributed layered defenses. And physically adapting those turtle tank modifications with the cage armor we see and spreading out high-value assets, this feels like more than just adapting. It's fundamental change driven by battlefield reality.
It absolutely is. The turtle tanks, yeah, they look a bit crude maybe, but they're a fast, practical answer to the deadly threat from FPV drones hitting tank tops. Spreading out aircraft and other key assets, it just makes sense. Reduces the payoff for a single successful drone strike. And this distributed defense idea means they're not banking on a few big systems to protect everything. It's a network smaller, more mobile, hopefully more resilient defenses working together.
And what really blows my mind is how fast they're learning. The analysis says their learning cycles have dramatically compressed. From taking over a month to figure out a counter in early 2023, down to just 2 or 3 days by 2024, 2025. What does that speed tell us about modern war?
Well, it's profound, really. It tells us the battlefield itself is now the R&D lab, the ultimate, most brutal lab. Traditional military development, taking years, decades sometimes. It's just too slow for this kind of fight. The side that can watch, figure out what happened, adapt, and push out a counter in days, that's who survives and maybe wins. It forces a total rethink of everything: procurement, training, planning. It suggests future wars might be won by whoever innovates and iterates faster. It's battlefield urgency driving incredible speed.
And a big part of that speed seems to be learning from the enemy. They're doing systematic reverse engineering of captured systems, pulling apart Ukrainian drones. And they've even copied Ukrainian FPV drone tactics. Shows a certain pragmatism, learning from your opponent. And crucially, now they're pioneering their own fiber optic systems to counter Ukraine's edge there. It's just this constant back and forth.
It is. It shows that no pride in authorship idea you need in this kind of dynamic fight. If the enemy's tactic works, you copy it fast. The fact they're now developing their own fiber optic drones, chasing Ukraine's innovation, it just highlights the intensity of this tech struggle. Every move demands a counter move, almost instantly. It's not static trench warfare. It's like a high-speed technological chess game.
So, okay, both sides are innovating like mad. But even with Russia's adaptations, the analysis suggests they consistently follow Ukrainian innovations by 3 to 6 months. This lag creates these persistent windows of Ukrainian advantage. They get to exploit a new trick before Russia catches up. It's like cat and mouse, but the mouse always has a head start. What does that constant lag mean strategically for Russia?
That 3 to 6 month lag, it's absolutely critical. It means Ukraine keeps the initiative in this specific domain. They roll out something new, use it effectively for months, cause damage, and just as Russia figures out a counter and gets it deployed, Ukraine might already be onto the next thing. It keeps Russia constantly reacting, always playing catch-up in this drone versus counter-drone fight. It stops them from really getting control of the drone space and lets Ukraine keep up the pressure. Even if they have fewer resources overall, it's a tech gap that's proving hard to close completely.
That makes a lot of sense. And even their improved EW has downsides, right? There are fundamental limitations.
Yeah.
The analysis mentions their own EW systems can interfere with Russian communications and navigation. So it's not a perfect fix, it's a trade-off.
Exactly right. EW is powerful, incredibly powerful, but it's often a blunt tool. You blast out jamming signals, yes, you disrupt enemy drones, but those same signals can mess up your own GPS, your radios, maybe even your own targeting systems that rely on precise signals. It's a classic problem of unintended consequences. So while Russia's getting better interception rates, they might be paying for it in terms of their own forces' efficiency and coordination. It's not a magic bullet.
Right, and that leads to this idea of disproportionate damage. Even if they stop, say, 85–90% of drones, the remaining 10–15% that penetrate Russian defenses cause disproportionate damage.
Right.
Especially against those irreplaceable strategic assets like bomber aircraft. The sources reckon strategic asset protection shows only 40–60% effectiveness. So it's a numbers game where even a small leak can be catastrophic if it hits the right target. It really changes what good enough defense means, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. This is maybe one of the biggest lessons from this whole conflict. You might stop 9 out of 10 drones, but if that 10th one hits a bomber worth hundreds of millions, that takes years to build, or a vital command post. The whole cost-benefit thing just flips. It means defense isn't just about how many you shoot down. It's about what you fail to shoot down and what that target is worth. And against those super high value, hard to replace assets, even a low success rate for the attacker can have a massive strategic impact, far bigger than the cost of the drones. That's why Taganrog, even if just one something got through, matters.
Such a critical vulnerability. And it gets worse when you talk about swarms. The analysis says swarm attacks remain a critical vulnerability for Russian systems. Only 20–40% success rates against them. You might handle single drones okay, but a coordinated swarm, That's a whole different
I
product.
know.
Why are swarms so tough?
They're incredibly hard because they just overwhelm the defense system's ability to cope. Think about trying to track one thing versus trying to track dozens, maybe hundreds, all at once. Air defense systems, EW included, have limits on how many targets they can track and engage simultaneously. A swarm can use different tactics, some drones acting as decoys, some spotting, some attacking. They can come from multiple directions, different heights, look different to sensors. It just saturates the defense, forces it to make choices, and inevitably some get through. For Russia, maybe with more centralized command, coordinating against that kind of distributed, chaotic attack is a real challenge.
Definitely sounds like it. Which brings up the cost issue again. The sources talk about unfavorable exchange ratios for Russia. Ukrainian drones costing, what, $300 maybe for a basic FPV, up to maybe $50,000 for something fancier. And they're forcing Russia to spend $100,000, $500,000 per successful interception with expensive air defense missiles. That economic imbalance seems totally unsustainable.
It's fundamentally unsustainable long term. This is asymmetric warfare 101. Ukraine is using cheap, mass-produced tech to impose a huge economic cost on a bigger, more conventional military. Like you said, shooting down cheap drones with incredibly expensive missiles. It forces Russia to pour resources into counter-drone defense, resources that could be used elsewhere offensively or defensively. It puts massive strain on their budget, their industry. It explains why they're scrambling to find cheaper ways to knock these things down. Guns, cheaper missiles, better EW, but it's a constant race.
So stepping back, this isn't just about Ukraine and Russia anymore, is it? This has huge global implications. This war is like a hyper-accelerator for military tech development. Systems going from idea to battlefield in months, not years. The lessons learned here are rewriting military thinking everywhere.
Absolutely. The conflict is a giant real-world laboratory. It's shaping military buying decisions, R&D, everything, all over the world. We're seeing this fundamental shift. The barriers to entry for effective, cheap offense are just plummeting. Every nation, NATO included, is watching every drone strike, every countermeasure, every adaptation. NATO's openly acknowledged they have similar vulnerabilities to drone swarms. It's forcing a rethink of air defense everywhere. The lessons from Ukraine today will shape defense policy for decades.
Wow. So this drone arms race, it's clearly not just about winning tactical points on the battlefield. It's fundamentally reshaping military doctrine, how we even think about defense. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In an age where cheap tech evolves so fast, where a small drone can take out a massive asset, what does a truly robust, adaptable national defense even look like in the future?
That's the million-dollar question, or maybe the multi-billion-dollar question for every country now. It's clearly not just about having the fanciest jets or the biggest tanks anymore. It's about agility, industrial scale for mass production, and innovating faster than the other guy. It demands a whole new mindset, moving beyond traditional platforms to this dynamic, layered defense that can handle swarms of cheap but potentially devastating threats. What we're seeing with strikes like Taganrog and this constant innovation battle, it really is a stark preview of where conflict is heading.